Hello everyone and welcome to Starscream's Ghost, a Transformers podcast, your episode-by-episode podcast guide through the classic Transformers Generation 1 cartoon and now Japanese anime continuity. I am Jeremy Graves, and joining me, as today, based on episode titles, it's very much double exclamation mark territory. And as far as I'm concerned, he is worth more than 2 exclamation marks in life itself. It's my good friend, Mr. Andy Hanley. Good sir, how you doing today?
Exclamation mark is my middle name. I don't know how that would even work. Can you even do that at the registry office? I mean, I feel like it's like one of Elon Musk's children's name is just symbols. Like, I guess you can have your name just be exclamation marks if you want.
Unless you put exclamation marks like at the end of your forename. So for me, it'd be like Jeremy Graves.
Yeah, but yeah. Name aside, I'm doing very well. I'm excited to see what planets get blown up today.
Yeah, there seems to be a recurring theme, and I know we've sort of alluded to that in recent podcasts, but man, this has become apparent again, because folks, today, as we continue our journey through the Japanese Transformers Headmasters series, we are discussing episodes 13 and 14. If you are a first-time listener, first of all, thank you very much for joining the show. We hope you enjoy it. But if you want to double back through the archives so you can catch up on all the previous stories of Headmasters up to this point, or for that matter, just all of Transformers G1, because we've done it all, you can do so now in the archives of our podcast, no matter where you have found us. Or if you're watching the video version on YouTube, hey YouTube, then you can catch every single podcast in video form as well. Simply search for Starscream's Ghost podcast on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio version, you'll be able to find the video accordingly there. Speaking on video, quick bit of random housekeeping as we like to do. We are following the Metrodome UK DVD release from circa 2004 to 2005. So what we are referring to is very much based on that translation. If you haven't got that DVD though, don't worry. If you search on YouTube, you can find Headmasters on there. And with that being said, Andy, episodes 13 and 14, we've got 2 episodes to discuss today, as mentioned. General thoughts regarding these episodes, especially how last time on the podcast we were discussing the aftermath of Cybertron getting destroyed, the immediate aftermath. Thoughts now that we're a few more episodes past that?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, as mentioned, the Zarak has gotten a bit of a feel going for blowing things up. I think like he's having a good time. From these episodes, I feel like the most important lesson that we learn, or perhaps the lesson that is reinforced to us, is that everything is Daniel's fault. That is a very clear through line across these 2 episodes. But that aside, I mean, these feel like 2 very different episodes to me in a sense. Like, episode 13 reminded me of some of the US cartoon episodes where we watched it and said, this could have been an episode from another series, and then they just slapped some Transformers in it. It kind of has a vibe of like, this could have been one of any number of other shows, but it just somehow ended up being an episode of Transformers. Whereas episode 14, I mean, not really a spoiler, this is actually like the first part of a 2-parter, which we hadn't noticed until we watched these episodes. And then the next episode title also has Mars in it, and it's like, well, we should have kind of joined the dots on this. Honestly, I mean, that episode 14, it feels like by far the most action-packed episode we've had in terms of pure... I mean, they could have called the episode, like, All the Transformers Have a Fight, and that would also have been an accurate episode title. And it's kind of rad for that very reason, that, like, it is a lot of action. Like, pretty much everybody gets a go at, you know, having some fisticuffs, doing a bit of wrestling, you know, etc., etc. And so it's a lot of fun for that. And yeah, like, you know, it's leading to the through line of these episodes. Really, ultimately, beyond everything is Daniel's fault, is also like we've had a bit of Zarak now, and kind of we've got a bit of a viewpoint on where he's going. This is really like the Fortress Maximus show of just like, hey, by the way, this guy can also transform into a sick big robot. Also, he has a sword. Check out the sword. And, you know, that's a pretty good selling point for both these episodes and the toy, which is really what this is all about.
Yeah, episode 13, like you were discussing, it does It does feel very odd compared to everything else we've seen in Headmasters thus far. It's probably the most, in a way, Monster of the Week episode that we've had. Aside from the fact it's also incredibly important to the plot when it comes to what else is likely going to be coming next in the series. So it's quite amusing in that sense how that episode turned out.
Yeah, I mean, this continues to be the thing with this series versus kind of the prior seasons that we've talked about, is that everything is sort of part of the bigger picture. Like, there aren't any entirely episodic... You know, if you were trying to... For the main USG1 cartoon, you could write an episode watching guide that are just like, these are the important beats where, like, important things happen, and you could skip all these other episodes. You can't really do that with this, because there is that constant kind of building of what is going on that is, you know, even if it's more in the background for an episode, it's still there, and there is still, like, clear progress towards it in every single episode.
Yeah, and the thing I will say as well, leading on from what we're going to be discussing momentarily, is by the time we're at the end of episode 13, it feels like we very much hit a new point of, okay, we established a lot of stuff, people have moved on, planets have been destroyed and whatnot. That felt like a very defining moment, the end of episode 13. And episode 14, it felt, what's the way to phrase this? It got me excited for what's going to come next because of what they're teasing. And like you say, the amount of action, it almost felt like if the series had, say, been in second or third gear the majority of the time, it feels like in a weird way we've stepped it up to fourth gear now because things are really starting to ramp up. Yeah,
well, and the series has also reached the point where, like, the Headmasters are absolutely the focus. Like, you know, it's kind of jettisons, you know, a lot of the sort of the previous incumbents. You know, Galvatron is missing, Rodimus is off on holiday doing whatever he's doing, like, with a bunch of his cohorts. So it has cleared the path to be, like, you know, the Zarak and Fortress / the Fortress Maximus and Scorponok show. And I think you could really start to see that now, because kind of Fortress is the guy who's having to call the shots and make the decisions, and clearly, you know, Zarak is doing likewise on the Decepticon side. So I think that's really what has allowed it to shift up a gear, because it is all about the new characters now.
So with that being said then, let's dive into the first episode we are discussing today. That being episode 13, Head On! Fortress Maximus. We begin on Battleship Maximus with the Headmasters and Fortress on patrol. Chrome Dome says, quote, "All systems normal. It's boring, it's so quiet," end quote. He then asks Fortress for his thoughts, adding, "Now that Galvatron's disappeared, isn't this our chance? While we just sit around here, Zarak's up to lots of no good. Like, when are we going to do something?" He's questioning, basically, why aren't they doing anything? But Fortress, being the level-headed leader that he is, basically just tells Chrome Dome and the other Headmasters, who are up for taking out the Decepticons, quote, "We have the right to avenge ourselves, but that's no reason to start a war, is it?"
Which, I mean, is I don't know if, like, Fortress has missed the message. I think they might already be in a war and have been for, like, billions of years.
You literally just said what my note is. I've literally got a note here saying, clearly Fortress didn't get the memo. They've literally been at war for millions of years.
Yeah, it's such a weird line. Like, I don't know, again, my Japanese is not good enough to know if there's a little bit of something lost in translation there, but that was genuinely funny to me, of, like, hasn't he realised yet?
I mean, technically, the Headmasters and Fortress may not have been at war for that long, because they were stuck on Planet Master.
I mean, yeah.
If you want to be really technical about it.
You could argue, yeah, that he is talking more just, like, you know, explicitly about the Headmasters, but I'm not letting him get away with that one.
Then we cut to a visual of Earth, with the narrator saying the following, quote, "Meanwhile, something frightening is about to happen on Earth," end quote. We pan across a busy city with tall skyscrapers, a big bridge, and then we're starting to focus in on a smaller building. And then we go inside and we see a bunch of office workers, but then the building begins to shake. It's an earthquake. Then a hole opens up in just the middle of this office room, as it were, and it reveals a giant alien plant of sorts, and it's growing and ultimately ends up rooting itself on top of the building. We see local law enforcement in planes and helicopters coming by and beginning firing at this giant plant. Of course, it has no effect, only angering the plant. The narrator then adds, quote, "The plant has suddenly appeared in San Francisco, and it's undoubtedly a man-eater. The Autobot commander Ultra Magnus orders the monster to be destroyed, at once." End quote. It was really funny, Andy, because when they showed the bridge, I thought, that really feels like the Golden Gate Bridge, but I don't know, maybe it's just generic City A or something. And then we're actually in San Francisco, so there you go.
Yeah, you can never quite tell with these things whether it's just like animation reference of like, yeah, we'll just use this bridge because it's handy. They wouldn't have found it on Google in the 80s, but it's in my big book of bridges to draw in the studio. But yeah, actual San Francisco. Lots of things that I like about that scene. The first is like the two office workers, one of whom is absolutely losing her mind over the earthquake, and the other one who's just like, yeah, it's an earthquake, and just like carries on what she's doing. And also just the guy who's like, his first response to all of this is like, call the police. It's like, I think maybe this is a bit like above your average police call out of just like giant man-eating plant has appeared. Like, this is probably a call the army kind of day, not a call the police kind of day.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. And it was very funny to see the different reactions to earthquakes, which, from a Japanese viewer's perspective, I wonder what that reaction might have been. Because, I'll be honest, Andy, one, I've not been to Japan. Two, I've never actually been in an earthquake situation, so I've got no idea how I would respond. But I'd imagine that is the literal polar opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to reacting to an earthquake happening.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, yeah, Japan is certainly more used to kind of, earthquakes of various kinds, to the point where I mean, it is literally like a meme that, the Japanese like earthquake instructions are to, one, get somewhere safe, two, post on Twitter, because that's invariably what everybody does, is they just, get to some reasonable kind of cover and then start, posting to Twitter as like, oh, there's an earthquake, lol. So yeah, I feel like the second woman in this example is probably far more like the Japanese office worker, are just like, yes, an earthquake, like, shut up, carry on.
So, continuing the story. Magnus sends the aerial bots, technobots, and train bots to take care of things, arriving just as the plant is now actively beginning to attack not only the police that's attacking it, but also innocent bystanders as well. The narrator adds, as we see all of the Autobots arriving, quote, "But someone is waiting for them. Bruticus!" End quote. So, the train bots are a bit surprised that Bruticus is here. So much so, Andy, that when they see Bruticus in its combined form, it's standing on top of the building, their response quite simply is, "You?" Which I got a big chuckle at. I don't know why. Yeah, and then Bruticus is... Oh, God, sorry.
I'd say my favourite part of this is the follow-up, which is basically why the Decepticons here, there isn't a power source that's like, malfunctioning or anything, which is like, man, talk about typecast for the Decepticons now. It's like, what are you doing here? There's no power source here.
This is San Francisco. Why are you here?
Yeah.
Basically. And Bruticus also has the line in response to the Trainbot's reaction, "I've been waiting for you. Come on." And then he suddenly activates like a lightsaber, and I'm thinking, wow, we've gone some places here all of a sudden.
Yeah, with literal lightsaber sound effect, the classic bit of Foley there, which it's like, cause I mean there have been like laser swords in Transformers before now, but like I don't think Bruticus has ever had one. I mean, that's sort of, maybe they're cheaper to make in whatever year we're in. So, maybe everyone has a laser sword now.
I want to say we're technically in 2010 or 11 in the Japanese continuity.
I think we're 2011, if I recall.
We also see that Menasor, the combined form of the Stunticons, is also lurking about, and the battle begins as the Autobots are fighting not only the Decepticons, but the giant plant as well. As the action unfolds, Magnus is watching on from HQ, and it just starts... Well, this is actually the line you referenced, Andy. Just starts saying to himself, there's no power source there. Why are the Decepticons in San Francisco? And then, shall I ask the headmasters for reinforcements? I will say, I like the fact that Magnus's de facto role now is watch from a screen in a base.
Yeah, and then call his boss basically to be like, can you sort this out? Because I'm busy. Like, Emmerdale's on in half an hour. Can you sort this out for me?
We cut to Maximus, that being the battleship specifically, where we see Magnus is speaking with the Headmasters and Fortress via a video call and alerts them of the situation. Fortress says that he's heard of this monster before and he's going to investigate. Meanwhile, the Headmasters depart for Earth to join the battle. Magnus's response to this is simply, quote-unquote, "Oh, you young ones, I'm counting on you."
I also enjoyed because he kind of like calls Fortress to be like, hey, can you send somebody out to fix this? And Fortress just immediately goes on the like, oh, I'm pretty sure I recognize this. Let me look it up for you. I've got some good gardening books here. And like Ultramarines is kind of like, sure, but also can you fix this problem for me, please? Like maybe we can do the research bit later. Can we just like destroy the man-eating plant first?
But then we cut to Planet Char, the narrator saying, quote, "Meanwhile, Zarak's evil laugh echoes through the Decepticon base on Char." End quote. So, per Zarak himself, in response to Sound Blaster telling him that the Autobot Headmasters are heading to Earth, Zarak says, "I see. Everything seems to be going according to plan." The narrator then adds, "But what could Zarak's evil laugh mean? Could he be planting a trap to divert Fortress's attention?" I will say, Andy, I really like we've got to the point now, because they've done it a few times during the show so far, but I love the fact they're literally using the narrator to reinforce a point or to help carry forward a potential plotline in just a very simple, generalised way. But to the viewer, more likely the kids, it's just a really simple way of reinforcing what's going on and what things may be leading to.
Yeah, I mean it's cheaper and easier and quicker than actually showing this stuff explicitly, and especially when it's something like that. Yeah, it's kind of it's an interesting, again, it's a very sort of like Japanese style thing to do, where you tend to have like narrators a little bit more kind of profusely within media like that. And yeah, because like you look at the US cartoon, the narrator only ever really top and tail things. Like they're just there as an intro if you enter kind of a story like in medias res, or as an end point to be, which is usually the comforting, like, yeah, we know we just killed everyone, but get over it, or whatever the equivalent is. But yeah, this is used far more kind of to actually drop plot points in where it makes sense.
We then cut back to Battleship Maximus, where Fortress is going through data entries on a computer and finds one of reference to the monster in question. He says, quote, "The plant originates from the planet Darhos. It's a carnivorous species." The discussion then turns to how and why it is on Earth. Fortress immediately believes that Zarak is behind this, leading to the following dialogue exchange between himself and Chrome Dome. Chrome Dome says, "Is it a trap?" Fortress responds, nodding in the process, "Without a doubt." Chrome Dome adds, "But won't we fall into the trap?" And Fortress says, "Don't panic. After we've rescued the people on Earth, we can deal with his trap then." And then they plot a course for Earth.
Yeah, I really just want to like cut my own video where I just repeat the line, like, won't we fall into the trap? Like, yes, we will. Just like, without a doubt.
It did feel like you could just put that on a loop, that little section. Yeah. Then we, the viewer, are looking at a planet from outer space, and the narrator says, "Meanwhile, on the planet Athenia, a strange phenomenon is occurring." We then immediately cut to Daniel finishing his dinner with Carly, and he tells her that he's going out, but rightly his mother starts questioning him, quote, "Where to? You've only just finished your supper." Daniel responds with, "To the botanical gardens. The seeds I brought from Earth haven't produced shoots yet." Carly says, "Oh, I see. They are taking a long time." Daniel responds back with, "Yeah, I'm worried, so I'll go check on them. See you later." And then Carly, slightly concerned, can't do much more and just sees Daniel run away.
Yeah, and like at this point, I'm wondering whether like was this the strange phenomenon of just like Daniel having his dinner, or is like Daniel trying to grow a plant the strange phenomenon? Like what what are we talking about here?
We then go to said botanical gardens, where Wheelie finds Daniel and just says immediately, "What? You're here again?" Daniel responds with, "You like plants too, Wheelie?" Which is actually a question, but the way he says that, it's a really weird way of phrasing it. Then Wheelie actually responds to that by saying, "You must be joking. Gardening's for old people."
I mean, does Wheelie like count gardening in the same way that he counts parties? Like that's really the question here, because we can't really trust anything. Wheelie's an unreliable narrator at this point.
Then Daniel just says in response, "I see. You're just jealous because I didn't give you a plant." Wheelie then says back, "Course not. But its shoots haven't grown, have they?" Daniel says, "But what if they do?" Wheelie responds, "We'll see." Eh? Then suddenly the ground begins to move. And Daniel just says, "The shoots are growing! At last! At last they're growing!" But of course, nothing simple happens in this show. And it turns out that where the ground is moving, the plant sprouts, and it's the same monster plant from planet Darhos. Wheelie immediately goes to take care of it, as I've written down, quote unquote. But Daniel realizes that something is wrong. And he grabs the seed packet that the seeds came in. He looks at the photo of what the plant should look like, looks back at the plant in front of him, and starts going, "That's nothing like the plant seeds I bought." And after wrestling with the plant for a bit, quite literally, Wheelie is literally thrown off by the plant, and then the two run away to go and get help. Which begs the question, Andy, and admittedly, we'll get onto this in a little bit more detail as the episode goes on, but where the heck did Daniel buy these plant seeds? I couldn't say it properly. Plant seeds. There you go.
Yeah. I feel like this is like a special edition of like Gardener's Question time incoming here. Like we've received this letter from Daniel in Athenia. It's like, I tried growing these seeds that I bought, and now I have a man-eating plant. Like, what should I do?
Send help, please.
Yeah, like, well, if you have a robot friend, don't let them deal with it because they're useless. But yeah. Who can say? I mean, clearly, I like to imagine that it was just like Sound Blaster like dressed himself up as some kind of gardener and be like, buy these seeds, Daniel. They'll be great. You'll love them.
I've got this vision of just like one of the Decepticon cassette tapes, just hiding in a plant shop, following Daniel. And while it's all on the counter and he looks back or something to maybe buy something else, he just quickly slips them and changes them over.
Yeah, I mean, that is peak, like, Laserbeak stuff. So I can totally imagine Laserbeak, being a little bit green-fingered with that. So, yeah.
We then go back to Earth with the narrator saying, quote, "Here on Earth, warriors from Cybertron battle desperately against the Decepticons. Just then, the Autobot headmasters arrive on the scene." End quote. And we also see Battleship Maximus hovering over San Francisco. Now, during the narrator's dialogue, we see fighting in the form of laser fire over the top of buildings and over two stanchions of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a really cool visual, Andy, specifically the Golden Gate Bridge battle, when they're just shooting lasers from two different angles. It just looks really, really cool.
Yeah, it's very satisfying to watch.
We also learn through dialogue exchange by the Autobot headmasters as they are evaluating the total situation that all the local citizens have been evacuated. Mainly because they're nowhere to be seen. That's basically what they assume. I'm glad they were so confident in their thoughts on that, Andy.
Yeah, for sure.
The headmasters leap towards the giant plant and begin engaging with it, close quarters combat style, but are quickly thrown away by it. We then hear the evil laugh of the Decepticon headmasters, who are now on the scene, their first dialogue being, quote-unquote, "Resistance is futile." Which immediately made me think, Andy, when did the Borg get introduced to Star Trek? Is this another Transformers did it first moment?
Yeah. I think we're we'll let them have this one as well. Yeah, let's just say that they invented the phrase "resistance is futile."
And then, after a few more words are exchanged, they say, this being the Decepticon headmasters towards the Autobot headmasters, "Let's see you dance." The Autobot headmasters are rightly confused by this, and then the giant plant, in essence, evolves. It grows a pair of legs, and has all but Andy just become a walking plant kaiju, as I've written down.
Yeah, it kind of looks faintly ridiculous once it has legs. I mean, it's kind of a bit of a stretch, but hey, whatever works.
Back on Athenia, Wheelie and Daniel have now got Spike to help them, because I'm sure he'll be able to help, won't he? Who instantly describes, at first glance, that the plant doesn't look like anything special. But then it begins moving, and Wheelie and Daniel just start throwing rocks at the plant. Now, Spike cares about the life of many, many a species. And his first instinct is to start telling them, "Will you two stop throwing plants? It's not done anything. What are you doing?" Because from his perspective, that's how the situation looks. But at that moment, one of the tentacles of the plant lunges toward Daniel, and Spike immediately grabs him and basically just says, "We're going back to base. We've got to figure out what we're going to do." They get to RC inside the base, and she starts searching through the data logs, and they come across the same info that Fortress discovered on Battleship Maximus. Once again describing it specifically as a carnivorous plant, but adding the detail of a man-eater.
Which, by the way, I absolutely cracked up at this because, like, yeah, they say, like, "Oh, it's carnivorous," and Spike's what? "It's carnivorous." And like, yes, it's a man-eating plant. Like, it's a man-eating plant. And it's like, I mean, maybe given, like, you know, Wheelie didn't know what solar meant last week, but the fact that Spike doesn't understand the word carnivorous is like, I mean, I guess never change, Spike, but it's like, come on, man, like, surely you could have joined the dots on this one.
At this point, Andy, Daniel now regrets buying and bringing the seeds from Earth. And I'm just getting feelings of, like, Daniel, this is why you don't smuggle things through customs in certain countries.
I mean, more broadly, this is why you don't let Daniel do anything, because it always goes badly. It's like, you know, no matter what it is he tries his hand at, it usually ends up in some kind of terrible parlous state.
But now, in a moment, to try and redeem his status as a father of good thinking, Spike says that given that the plant outside is completely different to the picture on your packet, I think this is clearly the work of the Decepticons.
Yeah, which, I mean, I feel like Spike probably just blames that for, like, everything around the house. Like, the toilet gets blocked. It's like, well, this must be the work of the Decepticons. Like, you know, it's like Carly's like, why don't we have any washing up liquid? I told you to buy one. Like, this must be the work of the Decepticons. Like, that's just his go-to for everything.
What? Did you forget to put the oven on to make our dinner? The Decepticons' fault.
Yeah, which, to be fair, I mean, Laserbeak is probably there constantly just, like, turning off the oven or just, like, turning the heating up real high when no one's looking just to mess with them. I mean, if I was Laserbeak, that's what I'd be doing. Like, never mind all this spying on people stuff. Just do little things around the house. Just, like, move all the teaspoons to a different drawer. And they're just like, what's going on? Like, Spike, what have you done this time?
I need a side story episode or like a 4-panel gag comic or something. Just a little ongoing series of just Laserbeak trolling Spike.
Yeah, like, again, if anybody would like to commission us to write Transformers comics, as you can see, we have lots of really good ideas.
But, back to the story. At this exact moment, we see that the plant on Athenia has now reached kaiju status as well, and is just pounding on the base with its tentacles. Checking in on the action on Earth, we see that the Autobots are not faring too well, not helped by the fact that Fortress receives a message from Athenia telling him that part of the base has been destroyed by the plant. His first immediate reaction to this, is the fact that, wait, there's a second plant? Because he didn't know, so I thought that was quite apt. Fortress specifically saying the following, quote, "So it's also on Athenia? All is lost if we can't find the monster's weakness." Daniel then chimes in on the call and says, "Fortress, it was my fault. I didn't mean to bring the seeds back." Fortress said, "What? Daniel, what's happening?" Which is it's just a great moment of Fortress almost getting to that level of like sort of the old dad character we've seen in past Transformers seasons, where someone's going, "Just someone make this make sense to me, please."
Yeah. Can someone just tell me the story from the beginning and not just like throw bits of it at me?
At this moment, the plant has actually now grown tall enough, this being the one on Earth, I should say, to actually be able to reach Battleship Maximus in the sky with its tentacles. And so it just grabs it, which apparently, Andy, grabbed it in exactly the right way to break the communication off that they were on. So clearly video calling technology was not that good then.
Yeah, quite.
The narrator describes Fortress as fighting for his life as we see the tentacles begin to try and crush the battleship. But then we go to planet Char, where Sound Blaster and Zarak are watching the action unfold on a monitor. Sound Blaster is taken aback by how tall the monster has grown, and Zarak responds to that thought with, "Ha ha ha ha, that plant is better suited to the air on Earth than on its home planet of Darhos. My scientific calculations are infallible." Some great dialogue from Zarak. It's got to be said.
Yeah. He is very good at the self-aggrandizement. Do enjoy it.
And just to like give him a little extra pep of confidence, if you will, Sound Blaster just responds with, "You thought of everything." Zarak then, to inflate his ego even more, just says, "Of course! It will grow and grow even more. Then it will envelop the battleship Fortress."
I do get the vibe here that like everyone, the Decepticons, is like, this is a breath of fresh air after Galvatron. He just like gets angry at everything and kind of gives us a kicking if we even so much as say the wrong thing. It's like, this is like a football team getting a new manager, and suddenly all the people that were incompetent before are suddenly like, no, actually, like, you know, we know what we're doing now. Like, it's all coming together in our heads, and this is way better. Like, we're in form now.
It's the new manager bounce.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
And just to reinforce the scene that we have seen here, the narrator chimes in and says, "So, Zarak's objective was to wreak vengeance on Fortress." Then the plant on Earth literally starts slamming Battleship Maximus on the ground repeatedly. If you imagine the scene from the first Avengers film, where the Hulk is just smacking around Loki on the ground, just slamming him, it's kind of like that. Just a giant plant kaiju, and far less frequent, I will say.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, to be fair.
And Fortress inside is taking heavy hits as a result. The Autobot headmasters on the outside are powerless to stop this monster, not helped by the fact that their Decepticon counterparts are just constantly hitting them with laser beams as well. Everything is not looking good. As we then cut back to planet Athenia, where Arcee and Spike are still trying to re-establish contact with Earth, but to no avail. Then Carly comes running in, shouting that Daniel's fighting the plant! And we then go outside and see that he is hitting the plant with a pipe, because Daniel feels entirely responsible for everything that is happening right now, given that he brought the seeds from Earth, so he is determined to destroy his creation.
I feel like phrases you don't want to hear in the midst of this crisis is like, Daniel's fighting the plant. It's like, oh, really? Do I have to deal with this now as well?
Sorry, I lost my place for a second there. Spike then comes... that just really made me chuckle. Spike then came rushing out to save Daniel from being literally eaten by the plant, and then tells his son, "The Decepticons used your good nature." And that's literally the line, which I'm like, do you want to elaborate?
I mean, also, like, Daniel, the Decepticons use your stupidity. But, you know, I guess you can't say that when it's your son.
We then cut back to Fortress, who realises that he'll be killed if he doesn't do something in a hurry. And then we see a sword. Now, imagine, if you will, think of like the old tales of, like, you know, pulling Excalibur out, or like Sword in the Stone and all that lot. Think of all those type of things. Except imagine it's just a big hole in the wall with a sword in it. But in this instance, it's like a big computer console. Now, Animation-wise, Andy, I've got to say, this was top-notch how this looked. This almost... I mean, obviously, it's TV quality, but it almost looked as good as some stuff we maybe saw in Transformers the movie when it came to sort of like the Matrix and whatnot, and sort of that moment when you first see it. It was nowhere on par with that, but in terms of quality, it felt something akin to that.
Yeah. I mean, I suspect we're going to see this quite a lot. Because this is kind of like, this turns into like classic transformation sequence, whether it be Magical Girl or transforming robots or combining robots or, you know, any kind of...
Super Sentai, take your pick.
Yeah, or any kind of like mix up of all of those elements. Because yeah, this very much has the like, guys, we're going to use this like probably every episode for the rest of the series, so make it look good. And so yeah, it is very much, it almost feels like it comes from a different show in itself because it is like a cut above animation wise. But yeah, who doesn't love a good transformation sequence?
Yeah, my exact note here I wrote down was animation wise, this moment is a cut above the rest, clearly means it's important.
Yes, also that.
Fortress goes to pull out the sword, but then says, "It's not working, I can't use the sword." But his comrades outside are pleading him to help them. So he pulls the sword out, holds it aloft, like he's He-Man or, I don't know, Lion-O from the Thundercats or something, and just shouts, "Master Sword!" Which, a little bit anticlimactic, but whatever. Then the energy his sword emits immediately has an adverse reaction to the plant that's gripping Battleship Maximus, causing it to let it go. Maximus then takes to the sky, and we hear Fortress shout the words. Now, I'll read what the subtitles said, and I'll say what the actual dialogue said. But the subtitle translation was, "Enlarge! Transform!" Which I got a chuckle at. But I love the Japanese dialogue, Andy, because literally the Japanese dialogue just shouts, "Big mode!"
Which, yeah, I mean, you know, that I feel like that's the true that is the only way to which this should be referred is just like big mode.
I loved it so much. Then the opening theme music kicks in and it's like, well, something big is happening now. This is important. Just like the karaoke scene a few episodes ago, clearly important. So, Fortress exits the battleship holding the sword, the Master Sword, I should say. And we see Maximus begin to transform into a huge body. The battleship is now a giant robot. But then Fortress converts himself into head mode. But interestingly, his transformation sequence sort of forms around the Master Sword, almost as though he's like a key, or if you've seen the show, the anime series Gurren Lagann, it kind of gives you something of a vibe like that as part of the whole transformation sequence. That's sort of what it said to me. And he locks in place, and then that activates the final part of the transformation, which I thought was a really cool little touch there, that it can only get so far before it needs the key. And then a giant beam of energy appears in the sky. This giant robot holds its hand aloft, and an energy sword just suddenly appears on his hand. It is the Master Sword in now all of its splendor. And we see a big bit of on-screen text as the transformation concludes, and it simply says in all caps, "Fortress Maximus." Andy, we have now officially seen Fortress Maximus, and it was awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, again, when you kind of pull all this back and think about this series literally as a toy commercial, it's like, how good a commercial for Fort Max is that, of just like the big transformation, you get the cutaway of him just looking very cool, and like you can imagine how many kids at that point were just like grabbing their mum like by the shirt sleeve, being like, mum, I need this one. At which point parents will probably go and find out how much Fortress Maximus costs and be like, no chance. Here, have this Cosmos toy instead.
Have a gold bug.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone is stunned at what they see. The Decepticons see the writing on the wall and just retreat immediately. And then, as Fortress Maximus is getting ready to down the plant, drawing his sword, which, I don't know if this is an animation error at one point, Andy, but the sword looked really, really tiny next to the body of Fortress Maximus.
I mean, maybe it just went into small mode for a little while.
There you go. But then the narrator chimes in and says, quote unquote, "The Master Sword, blade of blades, wielded by only the righteous and just. However, he is weakened for a time after using its ultimate power." So what I liked about that is it's established as well, it can basically only be used by the good guys. It's kind of like Thor's hammer in the Marvel Universe. Like, it can only be wielded by someone of a true and just nature. But also that little detail of the user is weakened for a time after it's used the power. And I immediately thought, that's going to come into play at some point. Little did I know, it'd be far quicker than I'd expect in one episode's time. But we'll come back to that accordingly.
Yeah.
But I really like that as a little detail.
Yeah, and it is kind of important because the problem that you always have with this kind of series is you introduce the big awesome thing and then the question becomes like, well, why don't you just use that all the time? Because then you could just like kick everyone's ass and like, you know, finish the war that Fortress is apparently not aware of. And you know, it could all be done and dusted. So you have to have some kind of limitation on the power. I mean, it's like the classic kind of, you know, shonen anime trope of like, oh, I can only use this once, and then at some point they'll have a training montage to learn to use it twice, and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it totally makes sense. But yeah, also enjoyed the narrator hamming it up with all of his Sword of Swords chat.
The monster goes to attack Fortress Maximus, but it's literally just chopped into multiple pieces in multiple places, and each segment just explodes upon impact. The Autobot headmasters themselves are flabbergasted at what they're seeing, more so because through dialogue we come to find out that Fortress never told them he could do this.
I mean, there's been quite a lot of that in this series of just like, oh, didn't realise you could do that. Like the whole telepathic thing, like it's like, oh yeah, we never really mentioned this, but by the way. So yeah, a lot of secrets kicking around here as it turns out.
Yeah, and when Fortress was sort of quizzed by them, oh, why didn't you tell us this? There was a moment, and then Fortress Maximus just responds with, well, I did have my reasons.
Yeah, he forgot. He just forgot to tell them.
And then just says, let's get back to Athenia. Now, during all of this unfolding, there is a quick change of scene where we actually cut back to Zarak and Sound Blaster. And Zarak, in reaction to what he has seen, says, "Ah, Fortress, I don't give up so easily. As soon as my ultimate weapon is complete, Fortress, you will never be able to beat me." Ooh, dare. Well, that's a good song, not what I'm referencing.
I mean, yeah.
On Athenia, we see Daniel, Wheelie, and Spike about to be ended by the plant, when suddenly it just explodes in front of them. But Fortress isn't there, so Spike theorizes that it might have something to do with the plant explosion on Earth. My immediate thought, Andy, is bit of a cop-out ending, but sure.
Yeah, like how convenient. I mean, I feel like it would have been far funnier to be like 2 days later and like Daniel's still bludgeoning this thing with a pipe and like finally gives up the ghost.
It was all my fault!
Yeah.
Got a little black rings under his eyes and stuff, just from how long he's been up for. We then see a communication between Athenia and Maximus, where, like we've just talked about, they presume it must have just sort of been like a chain reaction of sorts that caused the explosion for the plant. But they also, at this point, just outright assume it was the Decepticons that planted the seeds to Daniel. No pun intended, but by the way, I appreciate how I phrased that. But Fortress also takes a moment to reassure Daniel that none of this was his doing or his fault. To which Daniel is happy to hear that. And clearly, how much... The reason I laugh is because I then wrote, clearly, this is how much he values Fortress's opinion over his dad's opinion at this point.
I mean,
given he wouldn't listen to him earlier.
I bet at least Fortress knows what a carnivore is, so you know, I'm kind of with him on that.
With everyone happy that the situation is over, Maximus sets a course to Athenia, because you would have thought they might have done that already, given where they were, but hey-ho. And we see the battleship fly through space. And just because, Andy, we get to see the entire transformation sequence of Fortress Maximus again, with the narrator concluding the episode as we see this by saying, "At last, Fortress's ability to enlarge himself has shown Zarak that the Autobots have a new weapon. However, what is it that Zarak is constructing. What on earth could it be? Will it be the Autobots' biggest challenge? And then the episode ends.
Will it be a giant scorpion robot? Who can say?
And that's the end of the episode. And I know we were sort of talking about how it felt like a bit of the Monster of the Week thing, and even just recapping it, it is. But the whole Fortress Maximus introduction to this actually makes the episode, or at least the second half of the episode, worth watching.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, this is all a big lead, and it's sort of. I think that's the weird thing about it. Like, this feels like a strange kind of way to lead into this, but then again, I guess it kind of has to be, because you can't really have Fortress fight off any Decepticons at this point in that mode, because then that would be, you know, the stakes are too high there. You've kind of got to have something that ekes it out of him some other way. So it's like, yeah, sure, I guess this is as good a way as any, and it is kind of worth it in the end. So yeah, like the final chunk of this episode is pretty good for that alone.
And before we head to the TF Wiki, Andy, any other notes or random notes that you thought or came up with, or perhaps noticed anything during this episode that you want to make everyone aware of?
No, I think nothing else from me there.
Let's delve into the TF Wiki then and see what random notes we may or may not have from this. Continuity notes. Fortress's head mode was previously seen in the Rebellion on Planet Beast and the Shadow Emperor Zarak, because I'm reading directly from the TF Wiki episodes. Its true purpose is revealed in this episode. Given the surprise expressed by the Autobot Headmasters, despite the fact they were well aware of his big head alternate mode, they apparently never stopped to ask their leader what was up with that. Which is a fair point.
Yeah, it's like, what else are you going to do with the big head? But
the human helicopters which attack the plant are a rather futuristic design, one of the few times that any Japanese Transformers carry on the futuristic theme seen in Season 3 of the original series. Interesting note.
Yeah, true.
Okay, there's an animation and technical errors bit here. I'm just going to read out this first one because it's quite funny. Daniel looks so excited by his plant sprouting out that he completely disappears for a couple of frames.
I mean, if I was an animator, I would probably forget to animate Daniel every so often. So,
continuity errors. The Headmasters are cruising around space bored and wanting something to do. Hey, why not go back to that mysterious planet you saw the Decepticons guarding and sending energy to 2 episodes ago and haven't mentioned since?
Yeah, we don't want to start a war or something like.
Despite the fact he's seen it brush off Wheelie with no trouble, Daniel decides to later attack the man-eating plant. Again, alone, with nothing more than a stick. There is a point at which characters become too stupid to live.
if only that were true.
Trivia. So, why Fortress is unable to draw the Master Sword at first is not explained in this episode. The situation repeats itself in the next episode, which we'll be getting onto shortly. So we shall delve into that as the time comes, Andy. We're not told how exactly the Decepticons got the alien seeds into Daniel's plant packet. One can only assume some poor early G1 third stringer was forced to go undercover and run a flower shop on the off chance Daniel stopped by.
Yeah, what's Dr. Arkeville doing these days?
Is he not still like part robot, like stuck in Starscream's lab somewhere?
Yeah, he's now part robot, part florist.
I thought you were going to say part plant.
Well, I mean, maybe, yeah, could also be that.
It sure looks like there was some actual human deaths among the helicopter and ground police.
Yeah, we gloss over that, I suspect.
Raiden and Bruticus pull blades of their own out of nowhere for an impromptu laser sword duel somewhere in the general mayhem. This would go on to inspire the light sword accessory included with Raiden's masterpiece toy some 30 years later.
Of course.
Foreign localization. The Omni Productions dub named this episode, as Fortress Maximus's gigantic new being.
Yes, I suppose.
So, Shout Factory subtitles. Fortress, known as Cerebros, as we previously talked about in the Shout Factory subs, bizarrely asks, "What's that?" when confronted with the Master Sword. A better translation would have been, "That?"
Yeah, what's that is a little bit weird. It's like, it's your sword, my friend.
Likewise, Sound Blaster is apparently surprised at the existence of the carnivorous plant after it explodes. The original dialogue actually has him express surprise that it is destroyed. So, what is the plant's name, Andy, you might be wondering? Well, according to the TF Wiki, it is Buridanka, which is Buridanka, and that name is completely omitted from the subtitles, as was the case in our version as well, with the vegetation only being referred to, clearly in both versions at this point, as a carnivorous plant.
Okay. Except probably in the Omni Productions dub where it was called Tracy or something.
Would you like to know more about the plant? Do you want me to try and find the TF Wiki page on it quickly?
I mean, if it has a TF Wiki page, I'm curious as to whether there's anything of any substance to it.
It does. There is a page dedicated to it. A species of plant native to Darhos. Do we want to know more about Darhos?
I mean, I'm assuming there is very slim pickings there.
It's basically just that's where the plant lives.
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah, there you go. Nothing else major to note. It does note that in the Legends comic, and also its only entry in terms of episode inclusion is the episode we've just been discussing, by the way. So we're never going to see this again. So, according to this, in the Legends comic, years later, Fortress would reveal to Chrome Dome that he'd feared becoming Fortress Maximus and intentionally avoided it until the battle with Buridanka forced him to. Oh, okay. So we've actually just seen the actual reason he never told them then.
Yeah, I guess that probably makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, it does feel weird that that's not something they lean into a bit more, because we've had plenty of sort of, Fortress being something of a pacifist and, not wanting to fight, and so it kind of makes sense that, he wouldn't want to use his ultimate fighting form because, it's not really his jam. Kind of unfortunate that they made him the biggest transformer in that sense. But yeah, it's interesting anyway.
Yeah, well, hey folks, there you go. We've figured it out, but apparently that's not found out until a comic years later. So there you go. So back to foreign localization. In Mandarin, this episode's title apparently, now obviously switching the names around, but for the purposes of discussion, Zarak versus Fortress Maximus. It was originally Scorponok in the Mandarin dub. Okay, I'm going to read Italian first. So, in Italian, this was known as Fortress Maximus's secret power.
I mean, accurate.
And in Russian, Andy, the episode apparently translates as Fortress Maximus becomes more strong.
I mean, yes, also accurate.
And that is all the notes we have on this episode, Andy. So, anything else you want to divulge or discuss before we move on accordingly to episode 14?
No, I think that's everything.
With that being said, it's time to discuss episode 14, Explosion on Mars. Maximus is in danger. The episode begins as we look on a planet with the narrator saying the following. Mars is the fourth planet in the solar system. It is approximately half the size of Earth, and now the Decepticons are planning to destroy it. End quote. As the narrator concludes his dialogue, we the viewer see what appears to be two ships embedded in a rock of some kind, hurtling towards the surface at opposite ends of the planet. For context, think of it like the North and South Pole of Mars, if you will, or the equivalent of. The resulting explosions from the crash landing have a knock-on effect and begin causing more explosions, and just as the planet is going to explode, we see computer vector graphics, and I'm really confused for a second. And then it's revealed we are watching a simulation of what is Zarak's latest plan that he is showing to his other Decepticon comrades. Zarak says, quote, "We have stored the plasma energy generated in the destruction of Cybertron. We'll use it to destroy it," that being the planet Mars. Sound Blaster explained the details. Sound Blaster goes on to say, "Yes, sir. Firstly, we set the necessary bombs below the surface." Quick note that we, the viewer, at this point see a diagram of the planet Mars and multiple points at which they plan to set the variety of bombs. The quote continues. "Then we drop bombs to explode simultaneously at its north and south poles. This triggers off the plasma bombs which have been set in advance." Zarak then says, "All this super energy generated by Mars's destruction will be ours. The energy will increase the Decepticons' power." Now, before we go on to what else is said in this scene, Andy, I just want to say I really, really like the fact, and this is sort of emphasising what I was saying earlier about sort of taking the next step in the story, but I really like the fact that they haven't just forgotten about the whole plasma energy thing from Cybertron, and it doesn't feel like Cybertron's doom was just like, oh, that's why, that's just an episode thing. It is actually intrinsically important to the plot, but also something that carries over to other planets, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, my main question is, like, why Mars? Like, surely there are bigger planets that would create more energy than blowing up Mars specifically. But the flip side of that is, like, for all of the fact that it would be an obvious place to have episodes of Transformers, I don't think we've ever been to Mars before. Question mark. I don't recall us having any episodes that were explicitly set on Mars prior to this.
Let me have a quick look. Apparently, Five Faces of Darkness Part 3.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Let's have a look. The Earth Defense Command had a base operating on Mars. Marissa Fairborn, the EDC commander, received Blaster's request for assistance, to the beleaguered Blur and Wheelie on Io and lifted off in her spaceship.
Okay,
so we saw it for a scene.
Yeah, but we've not had, like, an episode on Mars, which seems so weird because, you know, it is, like, one of the sort of sci-fi go-tos of, like, it's kind of Earth-light, so it's sort of a planet that's always really interesting to have as a, like, centerpiece for a story. So, yeah, it kind of, like, just struck in my mind that it's like, oh, we've never really had a Mars episode of Transformers. That's weird.
Yeah, which you'd think, perhaps especially from an American point of view, it would be a very easy location to put something.
Yeah.
Or to set something, rather, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, it's nice and handy close to Earth. You know, once we got to, like, the spacefaring Transformers time, like, everybody knows what it is and how Earth-like it is. So yeah, a curiosity.
As we continue with the scene where we've just heard Zarak's big plan, Mindwipe then responds with, "I understand the tactics, but you have forgotten one important thing." To which Zarak says, "You mean Fortress?" And Mindwipe says, "Exactly." Mindwipe brings up the fact that they now know that Fortress Maximus is a thing, as it were, that it exists. But Zarak cryptically responds with, quote-unquote, "Leave it to me. I've considered that eventuality." I love this dialogue from Zarak. It is wonderfully cryptic but direct. It's great.
Yeah.
Then we cut to Mars, proper this time, with the narrator saying, "Meanwhile, on planet Mars, unaware of the Decepticons' evil scheme, Daniel and Wheelie accompany Spike on a geological survey of Mars." End quote. We also see that the train bots are there with them too. Spike and Daniel are also donning their exosuits, which we've not seen in quite a while at this point, Andy. I can't think the last time we saw them proper, but it was nice to see them sort of dusted off for a while.
Yeah. Well, because we, not least because we've had, like, Spike and Daniel on planets just, like, rocking around just normally. And I think, you know, we've asked that question before of just like, well, hang on, don't you need an exosuit for this? But apparently Mars, yes, you definitely do. So there you go.
Just rocking about on planets, including the destroyed husk of Cybertron.
Yeah. Just like, that's not a problem, apparently.
Now, an interesting random discussion point, which, for all we know, Andy, could be a future plot device of some kind. But Daniel questions whether Mars could become as green as planet Earth. And Spike responds with, quote-unquote, "Absolutely, but it could take many, many years. But that's why we're doing tests. Rather than make Mars a green planet, we could make Earth more bountiful." Now, I don't know if we're going to suddenly get into a bit more gardening, but given it's like the second episode in a row we're wanting like plants and green things, I get the feeling Daniel's long-term career is going to be a gardener, because eventually he's going to go, I'm done with all this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you'd have thought that the events of the previous episode would put him off that career path quite substantially, but who knows? I mean, I don't know. Like he saw Optimus Prime die multiple times, and he's still kicking around with the Autobots. So I guess he's not easily dissuaded.
We might at some point just have to do a podcast talking about all the experiences Daniel has gone through between season 3 and now.
Yeah, I mean, again, good like Transformers side story is just like, Daniel sees his therapist, and it's like, yeah, just tell us about the traumatic times in your life. Like, well, I'm glad you asked.
Eventually, they take Daniel to Web World.
Yeah, exactly. Daniel on Web World. That's what we need.
Back to the story. Suddenly, seismic activity on the planet diverts the Autobots and the humans' attention. They head for the South Pole to investigate a huge explosion, per readings that Shoki got on a little device that he was utilising. But the cause isn't immediately obvious, so they all split up to investigate in various teams and such. Daniel, Wheelie and Shoki come across a smoking crater, if you will, when Hunger, the leader of the Terracons, and Ripper Snapper emerge from said smoking crater. They immediately inform Spike via radio. The narrator then says, Spike immediately reported this to the Fortress group at Athenia Base. The Autobot Headmasters head off to Mars to investigate the Decepticons' objectives. End quote. The Headmasters depart for Mars, as we just heard, and they go in Broadside Andy, our favourite Autobot who has very rare random appearances now. So if you were looking forward to your Broadside minute, this was it.
Yep, it's he's still kicking around apparently.
But despite the fact that they've all gone to Mars, Fortress is still concerned with the mysterious Decepticon activity happening on planet Zarak. Then we see him and RC looking at footage of the planet on screen, and there's some stuff happening on planet Zarak. There's sort of purple lightning bolts going everywhere, like there's a huge storm or something. And RC even makes the comment that the planet looks alive. The narrator then says, on planet Zarak, Zarak is aiming to overthrow his mortal enemy, Fortress Maximus, and has constructed an enormous transector. As we've discussed before, everybody, that's the remainder of the body that the Headmasters ultimately head on with to take control of it. Mm-hmm. We see a giant green and purple body being powered up, or something like that in similar case. We then hear Zarak musing to himself that he will end Fortress, quote-unquote, no matter what size you've attained. So we have it plain and simple there, Andy. We now officially know what Zarak's plan was when it came to that mysterious robot. We surmised correctly. Some might say, of course we did. It was pretty blooming obvious. But it's nice to know we actually got it very clear and concise in that manner.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that was the way this was revealed. Like, I thought it would be more in the mold of, like, the Fortress Maximus reveal of, like, it would be used, like, in situ as a sudden, like, right, now's the time to power this thing up and what have you. So it's sort of this was an interesting way to reveal that. And maybe there's some pressure of like, hey, look, we're going to want to start selling these toys soon, so maybe we can drop some more hints in. But yeah, I wasn't quite expecting it to come in quite that fashion.
Yeah, especially as well, given that, I mean, if you watch the opening sequence, everybody, you kind of know what eventually we're going to get. Yeah. Which we've never really addressed, but that aside, yet there is zero hint from what I remember of Fortress Maximus being a thing in that opening sequence.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he does. Yeah, I can't recall.
You'd have thought if they were, because I remember one of the TF wiki notes when Rodimus left was saying, yeah, he left really early in the show, and they didn't re-edit the opening. He was just there through the entire run. This would have been a prime case of if we got to like episode 12 or 13, roughly where we're at, the opening would update to include certain other characters that have been introduced and whatnot. Yeah.
I'm sure if time and budgets had allowed, they might have done exactly that, but no such thing.
Continuing with the story, we then cut to Earth with the narrator saying the following. As requested by Fortress from Athenia Base, Ultra Magnus orders the Technobots to head for Mars from the Autobots' Earth base. However, Trypticon is waiting there to intercept them. End quote. Now, my first reaction, Andy, was, holy crap, Trypticon's alive!
Yeah, I mean, were we literally not... Was it the last episode where we were literally talking about this and like, where's Trypticon gone? Now we know he is still around, so always nice to see him.
I also like the fact we got a little bit of continuity as well, because we'll get onto it properly in a second, but Six Shot comes out of Trypticon, implying that in the context of the show, it's still called Dino Base, although I don't think they actually specifically call it Dino Base in this episode.
Yeah, they don't. And also, nobody alarmed Trypticon, but, you know, there is apparently water on Mars, so he should probably be careful.
We get a brief battle before Metroplex, referred to as both Scramble City and Autobot Base in various scenes in this episode. For the purposes of discussion, I'm going to try and just keep calling it Metroplex for this episode. We then see Metroplex go into tank mode under the command of Magnus, and this distraction seemingly allows the Technobots to start proceeding to Mars. But this is when what I mentioned happens. Six Shot appears from inside Trypticon and begins attacking them, starting what I'm now referring to, Andy, on our bingo card as obligatory Six Shot transforms multiple ways to sell toys battle moment.
Yes, yeah, they're really bigging this guy up, aren't they? Like, every time he appears, it's just like, got to use all his modes, and he always ends up kind of looking cool, and it's like, yep, okay, you're definitely on the, like, please buy the toy of this list for this show.
And then I'm thinking, we're going to get to see Metroplex and Trypticon battle it out again. I'm well up for this. I've not seen it in a while. And we do get that, albeit very briefly. Mm-hmm. It's a very quick scuffle, it's got to be said. And the dinosaur to be proving quite a challenge for Metroplex on this occasion. And that means, because of that, this fight must continue, most likely in another scene. The narrator then chimes in and says, meanwhile, on Mars, Spike and the train bots are under fierce attack by the Predacons, who have arrived to destroy the planet. We see the Autobot Headmasters arrive in the midst of this firefight, full transformation and tech spec shown as well. So, Andy, we are really in gotta sell some toys mode here. It's gotta be said.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if there is like a kind of an underbelly to this entire episode and the way it pans out, it is like this is a real like toy commercial kind of episode, because a lot of characters get appearances, they all kind of get to look kind of cool and have some fisticuffs, and it's probably a good box ticking episode of like, yeah, we marketed all the toys this week, so you know we did good.
Actually, I wonder, let me quickly go to the TF Wiki. When did this air? This was October the 9th, 1987. Okay, so still a few months until sort of maybe holiday season. I'm not too sure technically what holiday season in Japan might be, because Christmas isn't a massive thing over there.
No, it's kind of a bit different. But yeah, I suspect. I mean, there's probably still enough gift giving that it's may tie into that kind of season.
Yeah, but either way, definitely toy commercial territory is what we're in, to say the least. So, as the battle rages on, we learn through dialogue that Wheelie, Daniel, and Shoki from the Trainbots are keeping an eye on the smoking crater that we talked about earlier. To which Chrome Dome says that's risky and that they should send a Trainbot to go and get them. My immediate reaction was, but Shoki is there and he's a Trainbot. I don't know what happened here, Andy. It might have been a slight mistranslation, but that seemed very odd.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a continuity error or what the deal is with that, to be honest.
But at that exact moment, they are ambushed by the Terracons, that being the trio of Wheelie, Daniel, and Shoki. And Shoki is literally shot in the back in the process as well, leading to Daniel saying, "What do we do now?" And Wheelie, I know exactly what you're thinking, Andy. A little callback to the older Transformers the movie there. Alas, no swear word in the subtitles. And then Wheelie then just says, in response to Daniel being really worried, "Stop whinging. Where's your fighting spirit? But what do we do?"
Wheelie.
We then see the trio taken into the crater, which we later find out leads to a base of sorts underneath the actual planet's surface through a tunnel system. At that moment, though, Spike and the train bots fly overhead, because that's the location of the last communication they had with Shoki and crew, but they're unable to find their friends. Elsewhere, the Predacons merge into Predaking. So, yeah, Andy, full-blown toy-selling mode in this episode. Holy heck.
Yeah. I mean, just even the fact that we've had the Terracons for, I feel like, the first time in quite a while was definitely a sign of, like, oh, okay, we're getting the full roll call.
But to add to the notion, Andy, that we're getting full-blown transformation sequences in toy-selling mode, we also get to see, once again, all 4 Autobot Headmasters transform and show us their tech specs, despite us having seen it literally 2 minutes earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're really on trying to sell this time, aren't they? But in what was a really cool moment, though, is it's the 4 Headmasters against Predaking, and though they can't combine into their own Transformer, they basically do a quadruple team leaping martial arts kick, which is a really cool visual on Predaking. And that one kick is all it took to knock out Predaking. My exact note, Andy, after this is, why can't combiner teams look good in battle? Every time.
Yeah, unless they are specifically being, like, employed to do so and to sell the toys. Yeah, they always somehow come off second best.
Back at the crater. Now at the Decepticon underground base, easy for me to say apparently, Wheelie, Daniel and Shoki are imprisoned behind energy bars, the likes of which I don't think we've seen properly, Andy, maybe since the Killing Jar episode in Season 3?
Yeah.
And we hear that the Terracons are talking about the imminent destruction of Mars. So now, Wheelie, Daniel and Shoki know the plan the Decepticons have. Hunger says, this lot may become useful to us later. If not, then they can just die in the explosion. Rippersnapper, keep an eye on them while we head to Site Z. Wheelie then says to himself, this is terrible. The reason that the Decepticons are on Mars is to blow it up. Daniel says, if Mars is blown up, what will happen to the Earth and the other planets? And then he's clearly having more emotional distress because now we see visions of him thinking about the knock-on effect from the debris of planet Mars just getting towards Earth and just plummeting the surface with meteorites and such. Daniel's really going to have problems later in life, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like even this, this is probably bad news, the fact that that's where his mind goes to. But also, to be fair, like, he seems to be the only person that has thought about this sort of collateral damage at all. So, like, kudos to him for that. Because, I mean, had it been Spike, he would probably have been like, planets? Or something of that ilk, so...
We then go to Char, where we see the Decepticon Headmasters standing in front of a bomb as Zarak reveals his plan to lure Fortress to Mars. He orders Sixshot to make sure that the other Autobots and co. cannot come to Fortress's aid as well. Sixshot and Trypticon we see continue to keep the Technobots, now combined into Computron, which I've not got to say in a while, and keeping Computron and Metroplex busy. Computron is made to look so lame in this, Andy. Like, we've not seen Computron form in so long. And just literally gets shot in the back by Sixshot when Sixshot is transformed as a gun.
Yeah.
But to add insult to injury, Andy, Trypticon. We love Trypticon. Trypticon has been foiled in many, many random ways. You can now add onto your How has Trypticon failed bingo card, you can add in the phrase, gets kicked in the arse and sent face first into a rock.
I mean, it was pretty good, though. I mean,
yeah.
I really enjoyed that. You know, in terms of a lot of the sort of kinetic action stuff we've got from this series, like, it was... I feel like it's one of those things where maybe the animators animated it, and then we're just like, oh my god, that looks really stupid, but we've got to keep it in, because that's also great. Like, I feel like that maybe wasn't quite what they're going for, and then they look at it like, nah, actually, that's pretty great. We're keeping it. Because, yeah, that was good times.
The narrator says, Sixshot is preventing the Autobot reinforcements from getting to Mars. On hearing this information, Fortress decides he must go himself. However, something is holding Fortress back. End quote. We then see Fortress staring at the console where the Master Sword was in the last episode. Apparently Carly and RC are just in the room, because Carly then just says, why won't Commander Fortress act? RC just says, I don't know. And then Carly says, I hope nothing happens to Daniel and Wheelie. Note how she doesn't say Spike.
yeah. I mean, I'm surprised that she name-checked Wheelie there, to be quite honest. Also, to somewhat echo that sentiment, like, why won't Carly do something? Like, again, we haven't really gone back to this in a while, but, like, we know that Carly is kind of awesome, and, like, in her past life, you know, pre-Spike marriage was pretty badass, and now she just kind of kicks around and worries about Daniel, and it's like, no, come on, you can probably... I mean, never mind, like, blowing up Mars. Like, Carly can blow some stuff up. We know this. So,
yeah,
like,
go back and watch the Immobilizer episode, I think it was, from season 2, everybody. That is just the episode you need to watch for Carly action, quite frankly.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, yeah, let her loose again. Come on.
So we cut back to the crater, the narrator saying, Daniel's communication signals are too weak to call Spike for help, but... an emergency device is inside the Autobot symbol on Daniel's chest. Then we get the following dialogue exchange. Daniel says, Wheelie, pretend to fight me and tear the symbol off my chest. Wheelie says, a fight? To which Daniel goes, shh, keep your voice down. They'll hear you. Referring to the 2 Decepticons guarding their cell. Then, the stage is set between Daniel and Wheelie, the ultimate fake battle we didn't know we wanted. The battle begins, much to the amusement of the Terracons, Rippersnapper specifically saying, it breaks the boredom, let's see who wins. The fight includes mean-spirited dialogue, such as, Andy, Wheelie saying, you're not even an Autobot, yet you wear that symbol. And then that moment allows Wheelie to grab said Autobot symbol from Daniel's chest and throw it into the Energon bars, holding them at bay, breaking the device, to which my immediate thought is, Wheelie, you clown. But it turns out it breaking sends out some kind of big signal that Spike then picks up inside his exosuit. So, good job, Wheelie, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, for all the shade that I've thrown at Daniel throughout this series, like, this is by far the best thing he's ever done, of just, like, actually have the smarts to be like, okay, we need to do this in a way that isn't going to arouse suspicion. It's like, this is actually some smart thinking, like, I like it.
The Headmasters then rescue the 2 youths who relay the fate that the Decepticons have in store for Mars, and Chrome Dome, likely at this point perhaps having more PTSD when it comes to bombs and planets blowing up, sends a message back to Fortress. Fortress's reaction to this is simply, whatever Zarak is up to, I will not allow it. Stirred into action, Fortress rushes to Mars inside Battleship Maximus. Fortress sends Spike, Daniel, and Wheelie back to Athenia in the Trainbots, as, simply put, he doesn't know how long they've got left to live and when the bombs are going to go off, so just get off the planet before it explodes. In the process, Daniel gives the encouraging words as follows to Fortress. Fortress, please rescue Mars. I want to make Mars green, like a second planet Earth. And that, everyone, was your Daniel Words of Encouragement Minute here on the podcast. Fortress and the other Headmasters stick around on the planet to try and force other Decepticon Headmasters nearby to reveal the bombing location to them, because they've just arrived and have spotted them. A quick cut back to Char shows Zarak saying to himself that, Fortress has fallen into my trap. The Headmasters go into battle with each other, the Autobots attempting to question the Decepticons by using such known and proven pro wrestling maneuvers as a rear naked choke, trying to choke robots to get them to reveal information, which I got a kick out of, Andy, but it was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I continue to enjoy the fact that this series kind of goes quite hard on the wrestling moves, because, again, I feel like I've talked about this every episode, that, you know, the US cartoon was a lot... And I suspect partly, like, on account of its audience, was probably not allowed to do a lot of this stuff because it's always a constant concern, like, our kids will just copy it. So it was always, like, laser far from a distance. Like, this series has no such qualms about, you know, headlocks and chokeholds and all of this kind of stuff. Like, does it make sense? Probably not. Can you choke out a robot alligator? Probably not, but it still looks pretty cool.
Now, did they succeed in getting the bombing locations revealed? Yes, they did. How did it happen? Well, it happened like this. Hardhead has got Skullcruncher in the choke lock on the ground. And suddenly Mindwipe appears and starts throwing like the hypnotize ray towards Hardhead. But if you imagine you're sitting on top of someone's back and you're choking them, and I don't mean actually do this to anyone, but just imagine everybody. And if the beam is coming towards your face, Hardhead was very intelligent and just simply lifted up the head of Skullcruncher to receive Mindwipe's ray instead. And there's a moment where Mindwipe is still saying his chant and hypnotizing and just suddenly goes, "Oh no!" and realizes. Because of that, the Decepticons flee. The Autobots jump into the crater that was indicated to them, but it turns out to be a big trap. It's like the episode a few times ago, Andy, with like the desert and like the quicksand and whatnot. It reminded me of that.
Yeah, again, I almost replay the footage from the last episode of like, but isn't this a trap? Aren't we going to fall into the trap?
So the 4 Autobot headmasters are trapped inside, and they sort of get trapped by like a series of what the TF Wiki's noted as explosive energy coils, which I think is the way to put it. Just a load of guns mounted on the side of this cavern, and they just keep shooting energy coils at them, which just explode. And I won't lie, Andy, I thought the headmasters were literally being blown up because the animation was so good, I thought they all died.
It did look a lot like it, because, I mean, there seemed like there was some proper kind of body parts leaving other body parts, as far as I could tell. Because, yeah, I thought the same as, like... I mean, there was, like, a sanity check here of, like, of all the characters they're not going to kill off in this, like, they're definitely not going to kill the actual headmasters, because it's right there in the name of the title, and there's all, like, 20 episodes left? But, yeah, it certainly looked like they were blowing them up.
Chrome Dome calls out to Fortress to use the Master Sword, but the commander is not mentally and physically prepared for the task, and the sword will not draw. To elaborate on this, the narrator handily says, quote unquote, maintaining the correct balance between neural and physical energy, Fortress can draw the Master Sword and perform his transformation. However, right now, he is not ready. As the explosions wreak havoc on his headmaster comrades, which is a wonder, quite frankly, like we said, because they just look like they've died multiple times at this point. But Chrome Dome is shouting just so much, like, please help us! And it's that which gets to Fortress. The narrator says, Chrome Dome's screams have stimulated Fortress's energy. At last, his neural and physical energy are one. And we, the viewer, can see this happening in the form of a bar chart, Andy, where the 2 bars have to be simultaneously level for the energy readings to align accordingly. I like the use of a bar chart.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's, nice to know that the headmasters are also Excel masters. So
I'll give you that one. The Master Sword is unsheathed. However, as Fortress leaps from Battleship Maximus to initiate his transformation into Fortress Maximus, the Decepticon headmasters launch a plasma energy bomb directly at him. A huge explosion follows, with the power of the Master Sword seemingly cancelling out the energy from the plasma energy bomb. So it's all just cancelled each other out effectively. And then we see Fortress starting to plummet towards the surface. The narrator describing the situation and elaborating on what has happened as follows. The energy in the Master Sword of Fortress Maximus is cancelled out by the Decepticon's plasma energy. Having used all his energy, Fortress is unable to perform his transformation. Meanwhile, the Decepticons' plans for the destruction of Mars proceed, but can Fortress and the headmasters get themselves out of this mess? And the final visual we see is the headmasters looking up as Fortress is falling towards the surface as the screen fades to black.
Mm-hmm. And I really love what it does with these closing shots. It's, again, a classic anime thing where it kind of, like, I'm going to get in trouble for using the wrong terminology here from people who know better, but it kind of like posterizes the image and kind of like makes it kind of stand out and kind of like bangs up the contrast on it, so it like freeze frames and it just like looks super striking. I always love it when they do that thing to be like, look, important frame of animation, and it's like it's used really well with like the 2 frames they do it with here. That's just like it's the same effect that they use at the start of the episode with like the title as well, which by the way, kind of spoiler as it turns out, is a bit of a like I guess I bet you're wondering how I got here kind of like shot.
That happens quite a lot in this show so far, so I just don't look at the title cards anymore.
yeah, probably fair. But no, I really like that. Like on top of what is already quite a good cliffhanger, it's just like the way it presents that is just like, yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's just a really strong cliffhanger, and that concludes the episode, which, gotta say, Andy, I really enjoyed this episode. Got some great furthering of the story, we got some new things introduced, a ton of action and a ton of characters. I had a blast with this episode.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, this is actually a really smart use of kind of a 2-parter where it's like, because sometimes you have like part 1 is sort of, you know, just dragging things along storyline wise before it can push its big kind of cliffhanger your way. But like, this is just a good use of, I mean, like we say, very blatant kind of like toy commercial episode, but that's kind of what makes it work, because you get to see all of the Transformers that you like and Wheelie, and you know, you get to see them all having a big fight. And again, even like the Mars angle, like I say, because it's not been used before, it's like, oh, we're on Mars, and that is like weirdly kind of a compelling kind of point to it as well. And it's sort of interesting that beyond Daniel, they don't really talk about the potential impact on Earth. Like, that's almost a throwaway comment. Like, because I feel like the US cartoon is always very preoccupied when anything like this is going on, of like, well, what does this mean for Earth and the people of Earth? Whereas this, nobody really seems to care apart from Daniel. Like, the Transformers aren't really fussed. They're more worried about kind of what's going on in the moment. But no, it's a good episode. And like, yeah, I'm sort of definitely like, oh, well, what happens now? You know, because hey, you've not sold enough Fortress toys yet. You're gonna have to pick them up again somehow. Well, how are you gonna do this now? Because I mean, you know, pretty much the narration is just like, yeah, Fortress tried, he messed it up. Come back next week.
I do wonder now, actually, if there was like just a Master Sword toy on its own.
The Fortress Maximus toy had a big old sword, if I remember correctly. So I think that is like part of the toy, if I remember. I don't know. Like, I mean, I spent most of my life despairing that I would never own a Fortress Maximus because it was too expensive when I was a kid. I mean, technically it's not too expensive now, but like, I have a mortgage. I can't really say to my bank, can I take a month off my mortgage? Can I have a mortgage holiday? I bought a big robot. So, you know, but I'm pretty sure he had a big sword.
What did you just tell him? It's an investment.
I mean, yes, it is. It's an investment in property or something.
So let's get onto the TF Wiki then and see what notes we have from this episode. First of all, there is a quote that's noted here. I'm going to double back to one of my notes from the beginning of the episode to add some context here, Andy. In our subtitles, the narrator said the following at the very beginning. Mars is the 4th planet in the solar system. It is approximately half the size of the planet Earth. The Omni Productions dub says the following. Mars is the 4th largest planet in the solar system. It is more than 50% bigger than Earth.
I mean, smaller, bigger, you know, it's all relative, really.
Continuity notes. Plasma energy. So, plasma energy and Zarak's plan for it was introduced in The Dormant Volcano Mysteriously Erupts, as we talked about on the previous podcast. Go into the archives to check that out if you haven't already. The mysterious Decepticon, activity on planet Zarak was introduced back in the Shadow Emperor Zarak episode. The plot thread culminates in the second installment of this 2-parter. Ooh, okay, Andy, so next time, stuff's happening.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely felt like this was the plan all along. So I'm not surprised, but I am excited to see it.
Apparently, this episode marks the final appearance of Jazz. I didn't see Jazz anywhere in this episode.
No, Okay. Yeah,
But
I definitely missed that.
there's an Easter egg for you, everybody, then, I guess.
Yeah, it's a spot. It's sort of the new Where's Wally is like Where's Jazz, apparently.
Real-world references. As Fortress first tries to draw the Master Sword, sound effects of the TARDIS dematerialization from Doctor Who are used.
Yeah, that squares a circle for me, because I definitely had that moment in my brain of like, why is that sound effect familiar to me, and I couldn't quite place it in the context in which it was used. But yeah, that'll be what it was.
Continuity errors. After Trypticon intercepts their flight to Mars, the Technobots are saved by Ultra Magnus in Metroplex. He then tells them to hurry on to Mars, so they stand there still and stare blankly at him. I do recall now that's mentioned, actually. So, trivia notes. Beginning with this episode and continuing throughout the series, the opening title sequence is modified as part of a tie-in promotion with the interactive Video Challenger light gun system.
Man.
Okay, I think we're going down a rabbit hole here, but let's have a look. Video Challenger. Video Challenger is an interactive television toy created by Select Merchandise and distributed in Japan in 1987 by Takara. Toy television interaction was supposed to be the next big thing in toy marketing, and Mattel had a similar TV toy in North America at the same time called Captain Power. The toy consisted of a light gun called the Challenge Blaster that responded to signals from the television playing a VHS tape. The more the player fired at the appropriate targets on the screen, the more points the Challenge Blaster would rack up. The more times the sensor on the toy got hit, the more points the gun would lose. Since the game was only a VHS tape, the missions played out the same way all the time. Mm-hmm. So, back to the page for the episode. Henceforth, most of the Decepticons flicker white, essentially emitting a visual signal which could be picked up by the light gun that denoted them as targets to be fired on. The more Decepticons the kid with the gun shot, the more points they got.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that. That's a really cool, like, interactive thing. You know, it's Hey, if you're listening to this and you're like younger than us, this is what we did for fun in the 80s. We had light guns and stuff. Like, never mind your VR headset with your Oculus Rift and all of that. We had good old fashioned light guns, and we shot at our VHS tapes, and we liked it.
I detect some genuine passion in what you just said there, Andy.
I mean, I never had a light gun. I did have a light pen that you could use to like draw.
Likewise.
That was pretty cool as well. But light guns were awesome. Like, there's a whole I mean, an entirely different rabbit hole to go and talking about FMV games and stuff. But like, that was the precursor of that, and I do remember seeing that kind of thing and being like, this is so cool. How does this work? This is like magic.
So to add an additional note about this this crossover, per the Video Challenger page, specifically on the TF Wiki, the toy was cross-marketed into the anime The Headmasters, in which children could fire at the Decepticons in the title sequence, starting with the episode we just talked about, and score points in selected episodes. Daniel himself carries a challenge blaster in the anime and is sometimes seen playing the game.
I thought you were going to say you got bonus points if you shot Daniel with the challenge blaster. He's like, yes, he is also a target. But apparently not.
And apparently Video Challenger was sold in Canada by Irwin Toy and the United Kingdom by Bandai.
Okay, so yeah, I feel like I have seen it then. I didn't want to say it because I was like, I'm not sure, because I think there were a bunch of people that did like light gun systems around that time. Obviously, like Nintendo famously had one like prior to that, but I had definitely seen other light gun things. So yeah, okay, a Bandai thing. There you go.
Oh, that's genuinely interesting. I think now we're gonna have to keep an eye out for Daniel playing this game and carrying it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, yeah, like if we can find one of these on eBay, maybe I don't think it'll work with an OLED TV actually, but like if we can find one of these on eBay, maybe we can play the game. Maybe we too can shoot at Daniel.
We need to try this. We need to see if we can. Someone's got to have done it at a Transformers convention, surely.
I mean, this is the problem is, you would need the light gun. You would also need like a CRT television. So that's
and a VHS player.
And I mean, I guess like if you could hook up a PC to like a CRT and still watch this episode, you could do it with anything. It's just you need the CRT for the light reflection bit. But anyway, so if anybody wants to assemble this for us at great expense, then we are here. We are here to serve.
Carrying on with trivia, the Decepticon Headmasters defy anime tradition in the final moments of the episode by interrupting Fortress's head-on transformation sequence by shooting a goddamn bomb in his face. This is both underhanded and hilarious.
It is quite rude, really, when you think about it.
Interesting note, but okay. There is a lot of padding in this episode, both narratively and with footage reuse. Most notably, all 4 Autobot headmasters getting individual transformation sequences, complete with close-up on their stat panels in the chest, all of which are reused from just a couple of minutes earlier. Mm-hmm. The reason I said interesting is because I didn't think it was the exact same footage that they reused, but I did note it was definitely a transformation sequence again, but I didn't think it was exactly the same.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, they maybe cut it slightly differently, but it's probably, a lot of, if not entirely, the same shots. Which, again, I mean, it probably serves 2 masters because, again, toy promotion, and also, like, hey, well, that's less for us to animate now, so great.
So, foreign localization. The Omni Productions dub episode title was Mars Explodes! Watch out, Fortress Maximus!
I mean, good sound advice.
The Shout Factory name for the episode was Explosion on Mars, Fortress Maximus is in danger, which is the same as ours. Though, Andy, one less exclamation mark I need to add.
Oh, well, that clearly had some kind of, like, very specific sort of grammatical person on staff who's like, no, you can't just have 2 exclamation marks. Just one will suffice, thank you.
The Italian name for the episode is Mars's Destruction. Fortress is in danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair.
Okay, would you like to hear Spanish or Mandarin first?
I'm feeling like the Spanish one's going to be good this time.
Okay. The name of the episode was Mars Explodes. Take care, Fortress Maximus.
I mean, it's just, I mean, it sounds like, he's going to the supermarket, not to an exploding planet there, but fine.
And the translation for Mandarin is Mars Explodes. Fortress Maximus is in big danger.
Big danger in big mode.
There's an additional note here, and this applies to both Spanish and Mandarin, regarding Sound Blaster's name in the translation of the episode.
Okay.
Apparently, Sound Blaster is called Sanders. Sanders.
That's probably his nickname. That's probably what he was called at school. Good old Sanders.
Hey, Sanders, play some tunes!
Yeah. Like, that weirdly works quite well. It's like, if Sound Blaster / Soundwave had a nickname, it would definitely be Sanders.
I've just had this vision now, like Transformers at secondary school.
Yeah, and then, again, if you would like to commission us to write comics for Transformers, again, we are a wealth of ideas here. We're awash with them.
And that about concludes this recap, everybody. So, Andy, any additional notes on that episode before we get to wrapping up the show today?
Not so much on the episode specifically, but I did a bit of sneaky phone research while we were doing this, looking at the Fortress Maximus toy, and I was at first dismayed to find that the Fortress Maximus toy did not have a big sword, but then kind of both annoyed and excited to find that yes, it did, but it was a Japanese exclusive.
Oh, what?
And not only that, it had 2 versions of the sword. It had the normal version and then the big mode Master Sword as well. So not only did you get a bonus sword, you got 2 bonus swords if you bought the Japanese version of Fortress Maximus. So we were well and truly, like, you know, done over because, yeah, our Fort Max just had guns. No big swords for our Fort Max. And it was a really, like, the big version of it is really huge as well. So yeah, if you're curious about that, if you look up the G1 Fortress Maximus again on TF Wiki, they have a good listing of all the different toys, and you can, even if you owned Fortress Maximus as a kid, suddenly you will feel like you were hard done by because you didn't get the best Fortress Maximus because Japan had that.
People probably thought kids will eat the sword. Let's just not include it.
I mean, I don't think. You'd have to have a big mouth to eat the big mouth sword. Is all I'm saying. Is really big.
So next time on the podcast, everybody, we will be discussing episodes 15 and 16 of Transformers Headmasters. The episode titles being as follows. Bit of a spoiler here, Andy, but I guess we're going to figure out exactly how the naming conventions will work when we get to them. But episode 15. Explosion on Mars, Mega Zarak appears. Which I'm guessing is actually going to end up being Scorponok for us in our translation.
Yeah. Oh, man, if it's going to be called Mega Zarak the whole time, I mean that's I'm not here for that. But yes, I am excited to see the big reveal anyway.
And I think we've got 2 big episodes here, Andy. I'm just going to say, because the next episode after that is Return of the Immortal Emperor.
Okay.
And the screenshot I can see, stuff's happening. So there we go, folks. That wraps up this particular podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the show today. Our next episode will be out in a couple of weeks' time from the time this is being published, so thank you very much for tuning in. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at StarscreamsPod, and as mentioned, if you've been here watching us on the video version on YouTube, if you enjoy the show, give us a like and leave a comment if you feel so inclined. And do reach out to us on social media as well if you have been enjoying the podcast. We would really appreciate that. Also, if you want to, you can find our Patreon page. As we've discussed previously, it's not for any money. It's basically just a long-term audio archive solution. If you want to subscribe to the podcast through that, you can find the page at patreon.com/Starscreamsghost. Andy, before we wrap up today, any other additional notes you would like to impart on our wonderful audience?
No, I don't think so. I've got some seeds that I planted that a robot gave me to tend to, so I better get to that.
Oh man, I hope they aren't man-eating or carnivorous. Yeah. Take your pick.
Carnivore?
Gasp! Folks, thank you very much for listening and or watching. From myself, Jeremy Graves, from him, Mr. Andy Hanley, we've been Starscream's Ghost, a Transformers podcast. Until next time, take care.
Bye, everyone.